G'day, Ed. How are you, mate?
Hey, morning, Robbie. How you doing, buddy?
Live on YouTube. What the hell? What's going on here? We might as well go live. We're talking anyway. What's the difference? No one's listening anyhow.
I hope we're live. I don't know how to do this kind of thing, so I'm relying on you. As far as I know, we might just be talking into the ether and no one's hearing this. So if any of you are out there, please shoot a message just so we know.
Let us know if you're watching live,
Yeah.
so we know that StreamYard is working and it's doing its thing like that. So
Yeah.
I've been really looking forward to doing this with you, mate. It's been a bit of a road to get here. It's been going now for about 2.5 weeks that you and I have been doing this, although we've been doing this for about 2.5 years in truth. But yesterday we tipped over 90 videos on the channel in just 2.5 weeks. So you and I have been working hard there, and I just want to say thank you and congratulations for almost busting a ton of videos there. I think I'll get that across the line today for us. I'll create some shorts and I'll slice this video up for us as well. So looking forward to doing that, man. It's a big effort.
Oh no, look, it's all thanks to you. Look, you do all the heavy lifting. I just show up. I'm just the pretty face of the program. You're the one that does the actual work, so I appreciate you, man.
Thanks, man. If anyone's out there wondering how I've managed to edit 90 videos in 2 and a bit weeks, the reality is I moved from Premiere Pro to DaVinci Resolve, and that solved all of my editing problems and my editing woes, if you like. It just makes everything go so much faster when a program actually works, doesn't slow your computer down, and doesn't crash. So it's actually been a revolution in my life. It's been really something that I've quite enjoyed learning.
Little clue for you, Rob. Nobody gives a flying squirrel what editing software you use.
Well, I said to my missus yesterday, look, we tipped over 90 videos. Can you believe it? And she goes, yeah, you've been sitting there nonstop for the last 2 weeks since 4 o'clock in the freaking morning. What do you think was going to happen, pal?
Yeah. She hasn't had a date in 2 months. And what the hell? Yeah.
But I see her every day. She's like just there in that chair over there doing the thing.
I love Suze.
It's kind of good. Yeah, it's good. Hey, what's new in your world, mate? Anything that the audience needs to know about? Anything fun that's going on in Minnesota and your part of the world?
Well, let's see. Let me think. This morning I went to get a haircut, and I sat in the chair, and I sat in the barber's chair, and she said, "So what do you want?" And I said, "Give me the Rob Bruss special." And she told me I didn't have enough hair, so I said,
"Didn't quite work."
That's it. Didn't work. So I said, just do your best. I don't care. Just make it look neater. Yeah. So
so not much is happening in Ed Anderson's world if you're only just talking about a haircut, man.
Well, no, look, ever since I started doing this thing with you, you've been a taskmaster. I mean, I spend, if I'm not working on these videos, I'm putting salve on the wounds on my back that you know from your whips. You're a taskmaster, but
it's motivation that gets you started and discipline that keeps you going, pal.
That's right. But it is fun. They're like you. There aren't many people that I can have these kind of discussions with. At least people that I like, right? So, this is fun for me. I don't know about you, but I lose track of time during our talks. I think that's one of the reasons why we've had a really hard time breaking that 1 hour barrier. we keep saying, man, we got to cut it down, but we look at the clock then and it's 90 minutes long. Oh, okay, that's because we love it so much. So.
Yeah, I think you're right. I was watching after I'd finished all the editing yesterday. I was kind of just chilling a little bit, and I was drinking a nice cold drink and watching a bit of YouTube, just chilling. And I found myself watching some redacted stuff. And as I was scrolling through my YouTube feed, I'm looking, and I could see they're like 25 minutes, 28 minutes, 17 minutes, and like when you take each one of their segments and you add them all together, they're like on a 2-hour show as well. And I thought, now I found myself watching one of their segments, and I was looking and I'm thinking, they're just like me and Ed. They can't they've got to get it all off their chest before they go to the next segment. And there's like nothing left on the table. It's actually a pretty good metaphor for life, I reckon, is when you play, you got to go all in, you got to play full out. And there's no point in only having half a conversation. And I think, that's the rise in popularity of podcasting over the last 10 years and the rise of YouTubers as well, is you get to have that long form conversation, and you get to explore all of those things. I think I really discovered that properly when Tulsi Gabbard was on Joe Rogan's show, and Joe was like, sits down with a presidential candidate and somebody who has this belief system and has worked in politics, and she worked for council in Hawaii and that as well. So really to have a long form conversation with somebody like that is exactly how political campaigns should be run. For some reason, we just get sound bites of
Yeah.
these politicians, and you never really know what they stand for or what's behind it. All you hear is the sound bites and the talking points of them. And when Tulsi was on Joe Rogan's show for the first time, I think she was there for like 2.5 hours or 3 hours or something like that. You can only hold on to those talking points for so long, and you just get to flesh it out properly as well. You don't
Oh
have to
yeah.
be a presidential candidate to have that conversation. That's for sure.
No, I agree. I mean, look, I love the conversation. Listen, I think for our audience, this gives them a chance to be a fly in the wall to watch two guys, around, from different parts of the world talking about whatever's on their mind. But we're being ourselves. We don't have anything to sell. We don't have an agenda. So we have the freedom to give the unspoken truth. To cover things that other people aren't covering. And yeah, the programs might be sometimes an hour long or an hour and 20 minutes long, but you do, when you do edit, you do cut them up into segments like they do it redacted, so people
Yep.
can but people, they can always fast forward to segments that they want to watch. I mean, let's be honest, for someone to take a half hour or an hour out of the day, that's a luxury. That's a luxury most people don't have. They don't have half hour or an hour to spare, usually.
Do you think? I think it's a matter of priorities. I find myself, I've got like a really bad habit of, at the end of the day, sitting on the couch watching like streaming television, like my favorite TV shows or something like that. Sometimes I find myself doing that for 2 or 3 hours, but I've been up since 4 o'clock in the morning and it's 8 o'clock at night. I don't want to read a book, or just my brain is fried, right? I just want to sit and like stare at a screen.
No,
I've been staring at a screen all day. Like, what's the alternative? What do you do in the modern world?
and I'm hoping that we earn the right to fill that spot for some people out there. They choose us as their source of kicking back and relaxing, because we're not here to sell anything. We're just here to give an opinion. So I think I hope it's fun for the audience. And we don't just talk about nonsense. We do make an effort to talk about important issues that relate to people, and plenty of laughs in there, because you're such an easy source of ribbing. You provide so much material that I hope people tune in just to see what I'm revealing about Rob Russ. A little bit of voyeurism there for people who.
Well, there's something there, that's for sure. There's no doubt about that. All right, folks, let's get into today's show. We've got a couple of topics. We're going to try a different format. We're going to scale this back a little bit and try and do it slightly differently. I'm going to share a little bit about the unspoken war in a place called Tigray in Ethiopia that you might not have heard about, that killed more than 1.5 million people in the last couple of years. But there's complete and total radio silence from everything from the UN to your government to every mainstream news outlet that's out there, which is absolutely abhorrent in my view. So Ed's going to talk about CPI and what's the market's reaction to that in the last couple of hours, really. And we're going to talk about whether or not that's even real. That's kind of a funny part of that. And over in crazy California, they're talking about paying hundreds of millions of dollars in reparations to people who were not affected by anything other than, I don't know, maybe a nasty tweet or a bad comment on Reddit or something like that. But these people are digging their heels in, and the government seems to be setting a precedent there for some strange, unknown reason. So we're going to have a conversation about that, and we're just going to round out the show with a regular podcasting type discussion, which I'm looking forward to sharing with Ed and having a little bit of fun. So we're going to try a couple of different formats on the show today and see exactly what works for us. But I'm going to kick off today's show by sharing a little bit about the unspoken war in a place called Tigray. I'll just share my screen with you here super quick. So just to give you an idea of where this location actually is. So you look at the Horn of Africa here in Somalia, and here's the entrance to the Red Sea, and here's the Persian Gulf up there. And Ethiopia sits over here with Djibouti right there at the mouth of the Red Sea. And Tigray is here in this red dotted line there. So it's the northernmost state or province, if you like, of Ethiopia. And what had happened is there's a force here that were arguing with Eritrea on this side and Ethiopia here on this side, and they're arguing about independence. And if you know anything about this part of the world, these folks had been at war with each other all through the 1980s. And it's a very, very nasty part of the world. And they're fighting with each other for one reason or another. Ed, you would have remembered the famine in Ethiopia. Remember that? So that was a result of the warring parties that had been going on since the late 1970s into the early 80s. Now, why do I raise this ray of sight of sunshine here on today's Unspoken Truth? Well, the reason that I raise it is because nobody in mainstream media is talking about it. The United Nations never really spoke about it, and nobody in your government ever informed you that something like this was going on. And the unspoken truth is that these poor people in Africa don't seem to produce anything of value to the world. And it seems to me like the people that are in power, meaning the WEF and the UN and the International Monetary Fund, all of the people that hold all of the purse strings, look at conflicts like this and just kind of shrug their shoulders and go, well, what do we care? That we're not getting anything out of these people. But the truth of the matter is that more than 600,000 civilians were killed there. And the way that they were killed was they were starved. It's estimated between 50 and 100,000 civilians were killed in kinetic action, meaning from the actual conflict itself. But the remainder of that were killed as a result of starvation. And what the government had done on both sides, and the Eritrea side and the Ethiopian side, they were encircling that state and those people, and they just starved them out. But in the process of starving their military out, they starved the population out at the same time. It would be no different to you there in Minnesota, Ed. There was a group of vigilantes that came along and said, we don't like the government anymore, and started fighting the government. And the government turned around and said, all right, no worries. If you want to fight us, we're not really going to fight back. We'll fight back if we have to defend ourselves. But what we're going to do is close the borders, yeah? And nothing can come in or come out. And you're only going to survive for a given amount of time. But this went on for 2 years, and it only ended in November of 2022. So you sort of think, how can 600,000 people, civilians that is, die over that period of time and you not hear about it? Well, the reality is we know that all conflict is perpetuated by a narrative. And if you look at the narrative of the war of Ukraine, you sort of see it and you say, well, they seem to be giving them just enough weapon systems to hold the ground, just enough, but they're not being decisive. And I was thinking about this earlier as I was going through my Telegram earlier before I jumped on the call here. As I was looking through my Telegram, I saw the Dutch Prime Minister or Dutch President saying that he was going to hand over F-16s to Ukraine. And okay, now the time has come. We've got the logistics in place. We're going to do that. You're going to get your jets. There you go. Off you go. That'll be a decisive thing that actually happens. And I thought to myself, all of these countries, these NATO countries, they're in this alliance. They're all trying to protect themselves. All the weapon systems that they have, they're there designed to defend themselves. But they're there to defend themselves against the outside enemy, who was always Russia. And now we're at war with Russia. They're holding on to all of their weapon systems. It doesn't make any sense. And that's why the Brits in some way have been leading the way with weapons, saying that, okay, they've came out yesterday and said, we said a while back, we're going to give you long range strike missiles, but now we're going to give them to you. So we see this narrative that's being perpetuated where there's just enough weapon systems to hold the Russians at bay, but to also decimate the Russian economy and the Russian military at the same time. Now, when you juxtapose that over the top of Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Tigray, and these places that you've never heard of, you probably can't point to on a map. What I think is that because nothing is happening in that part of the world that contributes to the worldwide economy, those people are just forgotten. There is no narrative to perpetuate. So the narrative that we perpetuate is none. No one's to report on that. You to be quiet about that. We don't want to hear about it. And if we just look across the way a little bit, now in Sudan, there's all sorts of fighting going on there as well. And there's literally hundreds of thousands of people that are leaving that part of the world. And it shows me that the people in charge are not really the people in charge. It's the unspoken truth is that your prime minister, your president, your foreign affairs minister, or the people that are responsible for communicating what's going on in the world and helping the people that need help in the world don't care about these African nations. They don't care about them. But those people are just as important as you and me. Those people are entitled to freedom, to healthcare. They're entitled to live a life and to have a job and to do whatever it is that they want to do. But they're held back by the unknown narrative, the unknown forces of the world. So when there's no narrative to be perpetuated, there's literally no narrative. And those people are they're put on the back burner into irrelevance. So to them, to the WEF, those African nations warring with each other are irrelevant. The United Nations, irrelevant. The United Nations is the most impotent body on planet Earth and should be dissolved and gotten rid of immediately. How did we have the Russians chairing the last United Nations meeting and they're breaking all of the UN rules? And if you ever see the Russians in the United Nations, they're the most arrogant, hypocritical people that you could ever possibly think. So I even, and they're so like antagonistic when they're there. You're like, why are you even here? So I'm meandering a lot in this sort of monologue here, but I'm deliberately meandering because I'm trying to show you the unspoken truth that when there's something to be gained, then it's all through the media and it's all on the lips of your leadership in your country. The Australian government didn't send a brass razoo to anybody in Ethiopia that needed help. They're not sending any money to anybody in Sudan to help anybody. Well, if they are, you certainly don't know about it. And is the American government doing it? Well, maybe via the CIA, because the CIA are in there trying to control the places politically, and they're trying to sort out what needs to be sorted out in the best interests of the United States, because that's what the CIA do when they're abroad, right? So they might be responsible for all of it. They might be responsible for what's going on behind it, but they may not have anything to do with it. The point is, you don't know. And the reason you don't know is because it's not relevant and there is no narrative to perpetuate because there's no money associated with it and there's nothing to be gained. But the reality is, folks, the unspoken truth is that more than 600,000 civilians were killed in that war in Ethiopia in 2 years. It's incredible what happened there. And it's estimated that another 200 to 300,000 soldiers were killed on both sides as well. So the numbers are edging up around a million people. But when you start talking about 100,000 people here or there, what difference does it make? It's just an absolute tragedy of a scale that you couldn't possibly comprehend. And, it's not happening over a large country like Ukraine. It's happening in a small province, a state-sized province. So the suffering and the magnitude of suffering is beyond what you could possibly comprehend. And even though there's now a ceasefire in place and that's been holding since November of last year, there's still deep divides. They still haven't solved the underlying issues that were there. And there's an opportunity and a chance for this to kick off again, and kick off again at a scale where this time the government are not going to stand for any of it, and they go in there and roll them all up properly, and they just completely and totally decimate the place. At the start of that conflict, and I'll round out with this just to highlight the hypocrisy of mainstream media and to highlight the unspoken truth. At the start of that conflict, there was a massacre that happened there where more than 600 civilians were killed in one place at one time. Imagine if that happened in Ukraine. Imagine that if that happened in downtown Amsterdam or downtown Brisbane. That would be mainstream news for the next 2 years, and there'd be, people bleeding hearts everywhere. But it happens in Africa and everybody just shrugs their shoulders and nobody hears about it. But imagine if there was a massacre where there was 600 people killed in one day by military civilians. It's like the scale of this is just beyond what you could possibly comprehend. And once again, folks, the whole reason that this show exists is to pull the curtain back and show you the truth behind what's going on in the narrative there. And if you'd never heard of this war in Ethiopia or this place called Tigray, then I encourage you to go and look on behalf of those people that suffered. So you need to be educated about these things so these things don't keep happening. And that's the reason. That's part of the reason that I keep talking about these things. That's part of the reason I like history so much, because the historical precedent that is set gives us a framework for what is coming. They say that history repeats itself, but I don't think history repeats itself. The better way of saying that, the better way of using that saying is history rhymes. We've seen what's going on in Europe right now with the Russians and the Ukrainians. We saw that happening with the Germans and everybody else in World War II. It's really no different. History is not repeating itself. Germany's not invading anybody. I'm not saying that for 1 minute. But what I am saying is that history rhymes. And the Russians are doing the same things of what the Germans were doing. And they're using similar justifications to what the Germans did back in World War II. And I'm not comparing them. What I'm doing is showing you that history rhymes. And if you look back through the conflicts, and if you look back through how communism and socialism tried to take over during the 20th century, you will see that each time that was tried, it failed. And each time it went on, it was very similar to the time that it happened before. So hopefully, folks, you've learned a little bit about Ethiopia and Tigray, and hopefully you take a couple of minutes just to Google that to see exactly what happened, because I think it's worthwhile looking at, as hard as it is to look at, because you need to learn those lessons. And if we can just take one or two people at a time, if one person learns one lesson at a time, then it's worthwhile talking about this for 10 or 15 minutes on a YouTube live. Ed, what have you got? Have you got any comments or thoughts, mate?
Yeah, well done, Robbie. It's good for you for shining a light on it. And it really illustrates once again how useless the United Nations is, and how it should be disbanded. Not only, it's more than useless; it's outright corrupt. And then of course, they paint themselves in the patina, and they wear the mantle of humanity and looking out for the poor, but you don't hear them talking about things like this ever. And look, ever since I can remember, there's always been back-to-back genocides going on somewhere in the world. And we've always talked about it after it's over. After it's over, boy, that was terrible. Boy, we should never let something like that happen again. But they always happen again. And I guess you could argue that BlackRock hasn't decided it's not worth enough yet. For
there's nothing there anyway. It's just a desert, man.
There you go.
There's
no money to be made. So maybe there's a lesson in that. Where follow the money. And
it's a fundamental failing of humanity when these people, like, you talk about BlackRock not getting anything out of something like that because they're not there anyway. And the reason they're not there is because there's no chance that they can make money. So now they don't care about it. So no one gives it any attention. And BlackRock own everything. They own all of the media outlets. They own all of the people that own all of the media outlets. Mm-hmm. So any coverage that's given to that is like, hey, what are we even talking about that for? Just, it's a complete and total failing of the humanity of those people in charge. And I'm certain if you sat down with Larry Fink or whoever is in charge at BlackRock of that particular African, part of their portfolio, if you sat down with them, they've just been normal people. They'll be like you and me, and they'll be like, oh man, I didn't know about that war. That's really bad, isn't it? That's terrible. And then the boss goes, hey, whatever you do, make sure you don't report on that. Don't tell anybody about that. We don't want any attention on any of that. And that person's like, who's just a normal person like you and me, goes, righto, boss, okay, cool. Are you sure? Sure about that? Yep. And that's as much pushback as it gets. It's a failing of humanity. It's a failing of people to stand for what they believe in and to stand up for what's right.
Sure it is, but there's big time hypocrisy involved here. The same people who are lecturing us about going green in order to save the planet, and we have to do it to save some random owl in northern Oregon. So no more trees can be cut down to save that owl. Those people don't give a flying squirrel about what's going on in Ethiopia. They're hypocrites. So I have no sympathy for bleeding hearts, because in the end, these people are evil because they all have agendas. So anyway,
what do we do, Ed? What do we do when we see these things? Maybe we can counsel the audience a little bit, because I know I need a bit of counseling myself sometimes. When you see these things happening in the world and you feel sad, you feel outraged, you feel hopeless, you can't do anything about it. I feel like what we do here is it goes some way to actually helping. We've got a microphone and a camera. We can talk about these things, and even if 10 people see it, I don't care. It's 10 people that saw it that didn't know about it before.
All right, so people are aware of it. So what does that mean to the average Ethiopian? It's not going to move the needle at all. Right? I mean, so what? So a few more people in Iowa know about it. So that doesn't help the people in Ethiopia. Now, of course, the knee-jerk reaction is, all right, well, let's create a charity and let's send them some money. The problem I have with that is that money never ends up where it's supposed to go. And pretty soon I'm going to do a report about that whole industry being a scam, charity being a scam. There are numbers out there. And when I tell you the numbers, you are going to be sick, and you're never going to contribute to these charities ever again. Because, so a little spoiler alert, almost all the money, about 85% of the money, goes to the people, to the organizers. They get rich. People get rich off those charitable organizations, those charitable, endeavors. It never gets to the people.
Yeah, there was a here in Australia when we had the bushfires just before COVID in 2019, 2020. There it was horrendous and worst bushfires we've ever had in Australia. And the reason that they're the worst fires we've ever had is because the population has creeped into the bush, and the development has creeped into those places. Not because we've never had fires of that scale before, but where the fires were was just where the residential stuff is, and it happened all at once, of course, right? So the scale of it is just unbelievable. And Australians are very generous when it comes to those sorts of things, people donating money and donating like hundreds of millions of dollars to charities like Red Cross, but Red Cross takes the money and goes and builds a new headquarters. What are you talking about? Whatever you do, don't ever give money to Red Cross. Never. Find a small charity. There's a woman here in Australia, I can't remember her name, Shree Barber, maybe, I think his name is, don't quote me there. She created a Facebook, I think it was like a GoFundMe or something like that. And it ended up being a charity, but she'd raised like $52 million or something like that. But she'd raised more money, like, because people were donating to her because they knew that the money was going to go to the right place. And she had, I think there was documents in place saying that she couldn't take the money or do anything or run away with it. It's like not a scam. And it was all completely transparent and above board. But, literally years later, and the government tipped in billions of dollars for the funds to rebuild those communities and whatnot. But years later, people were still living in caravans and didn't see any of the money from any of the charities or any of the governments. And you're wondering, like, where is the accountability here? It's like people are so generous to give so much, but there's nothing there to be seen, which is it's a real shame.
Sure, it is a shame. It's a scandal, and again, there's no accountability. You never see the people in handcuffs. Criminals love charities.
You're right. Yeah, absolutely right. The one thing that I would say to close this out is that, even if you can't do something about what we're talking about, the unspoken truth, the war in Ethiopia, the war in Europe, or the war wherever, if you give it a little bit of attention and you pay some attention to these things, then at least you're a little bit educated on it. And when somebody is having a conversation about something and they're unwittingly, and they don't mean to be, but they're unwittingly being a mouthpiece of the deep state mainstream media, then at least you're armed with a little bit of information to go, hang on a minute, just back up for a sec. Let me give you a different perspective. And at least you can have a conversation that helps people to open up the aperture of what's going on. Because if you know a little bit about it, then you might be one of the people that's responsible for helping other people to understand that history doesn't have to repeat itself and history doesn't have to rhyme. So that's one reason right there to actually look at these things and to give it a little bit more attention. All right, let's move off the cheery subject of 600,000 people being starved to death in Ethiopia, and let's talk about something a little bit closer to home. The CPI numbers came out in the US there yesterday. Ed, what was the reaction in the market? What happened? What did people say?
Okay, so let's review a couple things real quickly. So I'm going to do a quick, I hope I get this right. So I'm going to bring up a little overlay here, just to remind people where we stand with inflation. So this is the history of the U.S. inflation rate in the timeline since January of 21. So we started back there at 1.4, and of course 2.6. Of course, right around here is where, it's just transitory. It's not going to be around very long. 6.8, 7.9, and they hit a high of 9% this time last year. So last June, and then now we're at 5%. Now, okay, take these numbers for whatever they're worth, right? If you tell me in the comment section, do you think inflation is really at 5%? I mean, I personally don't, but that's a separate. But let's go ahead and use these official numbers just for sake of argument. Now, the official Fed's fund rate is supposed to be 2%, right? So this is supposed to be. How do I get out of this? So if the target rate for the Fed is 2%, they got a long ways to go. So let's talk about what happened today with the CPI. And I thought at the last minute about talking about this because it is relevant. It is important. It is part of the overall story that we've been talking about now for weeks. All right, so I'm going to do another screen share now. So bear with me a second. Present screen share. I'm going to get better at this, people, I promise.
You'll get there. You'll get there. Keep going.
All right, there we go. All right. Okay, so this is out of Zero Hedge. Now we can see that the Fed's new favorite signal from the BLS is the core services CPI. That's minus shelter. Okay, this is what these guys do. They pick and choose.
They're changing history by changing the definitions, man. Stop it.
That's right. But even okay, so according to government numbers, let's say okay, so came in at 0.4%, month over month, and then year over year 4.9%, a little bit less. All right, now look at this graph here. I want to. There's a couple of lessons here that I want to kind of give you guys a little bit of financial education, a little bit of peek behind the financial curtain, what they think about on Wall Street, right? Now, Wall Street is a little bit weird. Okay, it thinks that it takes what is normally you would think would be good news and it's bad news. So there are times on Wall Street when bad news is good news and when good news is bad news. Right. So
sounds like a PR spin that any news is good news, good or bad. It doesn't matter.
well, I'm telling you the way traders think. I'm telling you that this is the way Wall Street thinks. And it is a little weird, but you have to learn, but there is some logic behind it. And you got to kind of know the game. So I'm going to give you guys a little peek into Wall Street logic. All right. Now, stay with me here. Now, the Federal Reserve's primary job, as we know, is supposed to be to fight inflation. The primary tool to do that is to raise interest rates. And the idea behind raising rates is literally to make our lives miserable. That's their job. They want to get us to stop spending money. So that's what raising rates is supposed to do. It's supposed to have that effect. It's supposed to make it more expensive for you to buy that house, buy that car, just live your life. So the process of raising rates is an intentional impoverishment of the people. So they're intentionally trying to make your life difficult. So when there's good news, when CPI is up, that means people are spending money, right? They're buying stuff. They're not slowing down at all. That's not good. They want you to slow down. So whereas you would think, oh, this is good. Everyone's doing well. The economy is strong. The Fed is thinking that this is not good. It's overheating. We have to slow you down. So if Wall Street likes lower rates, so when they see that the CPI is coming down a little bit, okay, that's bad news for the average person. Okay, economy slowing down a little bit, but Wall Street is thinking, okay, well that's good news for us because that makes it less likely for the Federal Reserve to continue their rate hiking. Okay. So Wall Street wants as easy money as possible. So the idea that the Federal Reserve might have an excuse now to stop raising rates, Wall Street sees that as a positive sign. So you would think that the market would be rallying in the face of this. Okay, so what I'm trying to illustrate here is the idea that bad news isn't always bad news. And good news isn't always good news from a Wall Street perspective at any given point in time. And it all depends on what you're comparing it to. Now, Wall Street is a discounting mechanism, right? It always looks 6 months, a year down the road. It wants to be early. So Wall Street is always reading the tea leaves. It's always trying to guess what's going to happen because they want to be in first, right? They want to be the first guy in. So they're trying to anticipate what's coming down the road. So a lot of this, but there is kind of a group thing here. There is kind of a consensus going on. Now, one of the edisms that were out there when I taught my course is that the market is always right. Never argue with the market. You might have an opinion about something, and it might be a very well-founded decision, and it might be backed by all sorts of academics. But in the end, the only thing that matters is whether your stock, your bond, your whatever you're in is going up or down, and you're on the right side of it. That's the only thing that matters. And what makes the markets go up and down is buying pressure. That's it. So I'm getting there, guys. So just stay with me here. So what you always want to do is you want to look at the market's reaction. It's never about the news. This is another edism, by the way. It's never the news. It's the reaction to the news. The news is almost irrelevant. So even though I just gave you a long explanation of how good news is bad news, and I told you, well, relative to the CPI, this was, okay, that's all kind of good to know in the background. But in the end, what's most important is the reaction to the news. And there's another edism called the theory of relativity. And I came up with this one on my own. The theory of relativity in the markets. And that states that when a stock or the market or anything reacts the opposite way that it should react, that makes that move even more important. What I mean by that is, for example, let's say that a company comes out after the market closes with really good earnings news. Okay, this spectacular news. So that stock should be going up on that news, right? But instead, it doesn't go up, or it goes up a little bit, or it goes down. Well, if the stock goes down in the face of good news, that tells you the top is in. Because if it won't go up on good news, imagine what it'll do when it has bad news. Okay, so the news, and same in the reverse. If a company comes out with what you would consider bad news, but the stock goes up, that tells you that everyone who wanted to sell that stock has already sold it. It's bottomed. Because so you got to learn to think of things a little bit differently, right? So the reaction to the news is what's important, not the news itself. The news itself, yeah, take a look at it. Okay, but what's really important is the reaction to the news. And don't think that you know more than the market does. The market is always right. If you argue with the market, you're going to be humbled really quickly. Okay, you're going to lose that argument every time. So look at what the market's telling you. So having said that, what is the market doing today? Let me bring up a chart. First I got to bring it up, then I'll share it.
While you're doing that, Ed,
Yeah.
I just want to just offer a comment there on what you said, because the whole time I've known you is you've always said that the markets are based on people and the decisions that people make. So when I listen to the unspoken truth between your 30 years of Wall Street wisdom there, one thing that I'm hearing is it doesn't matter what the media pundit comes out and says. It doesn't matter what the government says. Whether it's good news or bad news, all that matters is the reaction to the market. But those people are smart enough to know that in the past, when they've come out and perpetuated good or bad news, the market will react in a certain way. So essentially what those people are doing is manipulating the market in the direction that they want it to be manipulated. And that shows you how they're in complete and total control of the economy.
Yeah, and that's more effective, of course. The smaller the vehicle, whether it's easier to do that with a small stock than it is with a large stock, right? Because if you're talking about a large stock and you want to influence it, well, you're one voice among many voices who are covering that particular guy, so you can be lost in the crowd. But if it's a random little stock that nobody really covers very much, that's where most manipulation goes on, because there aren't many people following it, so your voice is louder, so you can affect it more. That's true. So if a respected Wall Street analyst goes on Wall Street and says something that could affect the market, that's one thing. If I went on CNBC, no one knows who the hell I am. My opinion isn't going to affect the market, right? So there are degrees to that.
Well, that was on full display for all of us to see recently when the numbers came out for the US economy, and they said, oh, we're in recession. And then they came out and said, no, that's technically a recession. It's not that. That's not a recession. The recession, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, hey, listen here, you socialist, fascist, dickhead, that you can't go changing the dictionary to suit your narrative. Yet they changed the dictionary to suit the narrative. And now they come out and say, well, it's not going to be a soft landing towards the end of the year. We might be in a recession. And then yesterday you say that 50% of 722 banks, or they've got more than 50% asset losses that are unrealized on their books. And you think, well, how are they going to spin this? Otherwise known as government spin. So what are they going to do to spin it? And why are they spinning the narrative in that particular direction? It doesn't make any sense to me. Like when you look at it, try and look at it in its totality, it doesn't make sense. But the reality is they know exactly what they're doing, because to your point, they're thinking years and years ahead, and they're trying to get ahead of all the negativity that's there. So have you got that chart for us? What we're going to show?
Yeah, well, it's not coming. It said, I think because my BPM, I don't know what it is. But so I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I'll bring up them.
My phone. Look at it on your phone.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So anyway,
we've got a rally.
Yeah. The market's down. It's been a wild day. Okay, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been up and down, hasn't it?
Yeah. So, but net is the market down like 30 points on the day. Now this is a trader's market, and it's a very headline-driven market. So day by day, there are really good opportunities, long and short. For investing, I don't see any real reason to make a move one way or we are in what you call a trading range, a very big, sloppy trading range right now. So don't agonize over what's going on day by day. Look at the big numbers that we've talked about before on this channel, and I will bring up again when I can get the charts going. But at the moment, the market right now is very sloppy and it's very headline driven. One day will be completely different than the previous day and the following day. So they're kind of like independent, entity, because there's something specific going on that day. But overall, Wall Street is waiting for the next big catalyst. And now we don't know what the big catalyst is going to be. Maybe JP Morgan will announce some troubles in their credit swap derivatives market or something. So some piece of no, I'm a bear on the market. I think there are really big problems coming up in the market. I wouldn't be touching a bank stock one way or the other. I wouldn't be trying to short them either, because you can see what happened on Friday. You can get your face ripped off when you're trying to short these guys here. It's too late to short them. So I just wanted to talk about what's going on with the CPI number today, let you know what's going on in the markets, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. Just kind of a few lessons in there about trading. I wanted an excuse to put a few lessons out there about trading.
Well, there's something in there that skews those CPI numbers, because for how many years prior so if you don't know, consumer price index is the basket of goodies. How much does bread, eggs, milk, butter, all of those things cost in your basket of goodies? But then they adjust, they in air quotes adjust the CPI not to include the cost of your rental or the cost of your mortgage because of interest rates. And interest rates are rallying, but interest rates have been zero for the last 5 or 7 years or whatever it is. And now they're rallying. So we can't do that, because as soon as we put that into the basket of goodies, all of a sudden the CPI numbers don't look like 5 or 9%. They look like 14 or 15%.
And you beat me to it. I was going to tell you that if you took the pre-1994 numbers, because that's when they started adjusting the basket of what made CPI. If you use that original package, we would be at 14.1%. Right now.
It's otherwise known, the way you can sum that up in one funny word is it's an oxymoron. You're using some sort of figures from the past, but then you're manipulating the figures. We had the federal budget here in Australia come out in the last couple of days, and the Treasurer of Australia goes and does the rounds before the budget. He delivers his budget and then does the rounds afterwards, right? And then the opposition last night would have, the opposition treasurer, the shadow treasurer, would have got up in Parliament and said, this is what we believe. But the problem is, like, trying to get a reaction to a big document. There was something like 180 line items there, and these opposition party shadow ministers have to go through each line item, right, and see where it fits in. But the government has had the advantage of so it's very hard to craft a response to something like that in one day. It's very, very difficult. They should be given a week or something at least to be able to craft a response to that and say whether they do or they don't support something. But the oxymoron in what had come out with the federal treasurer, he said, he claimed that this was a de-inflationary budget. We understand that cost of living pressures here in Australia are a problem, and what we're going to do is address those cost of living pressures by increasing social welfare, by helping people that are poor. We're going to give them more money. So just think about the oxymoron statement that he's saying there for a second. We're going to address the cost of living by giving you more money. And when there's more money in society, what does that do? It drives more inflation.
Yeah. These politicians, they count on us being stupid. They count on it.
All you have to do is just listen to his words. And even there's a whole lot of analysts on conservative media saying that this is the worst Labor budget that's ever been passed. We shouldn't have expected anything less. There's like $180 billion worth of spending, and that apparently we've had a huge boom in the mining industry here, and it's created massive tax revenues. But once again, the oxymoron is that they want to turn coal off. They want to turn gas off. But that's actually what's sustaining the country and giving us massive prosperity. And give the treasurer the benefit of the doubt. He can see what we can't see. He's got more opportunity, and he's got more data at his fingertips. Assume that he actually is trying to do the right thing, and we look up and out at the forecast, and the forecast is really good for the next 5 years. Well, if you're going to turn off all those coal mines and all the gas exports that we've got going on, how does that impact the forward estimates of what we've got going on? That's never discussed. And it's strange that you want to move us to a green economy that is crushed by solar energy, by wind, by pumped hydro, and all of this garbage that they're trying to put out there. But you want to continue to export all of it. We've got it all here, but you want to turn it off here and export it, and then cause us to go into blackouts and brownouts and increase the cost of everything. The whole thing is an oxymoron. And you saying that you're addressing inflation by giving handouts and increasing taxes doesn't make any sense. Under a Labor government, all you ever experience, it doesn't matter what Labor government you are in, what part of the world, you'll experience higher taxes and you'll experience spending that goes off the charts. But once again, it's very easy for me to sit back here and be the political pundit, the Treasury analyst wannabe. I don't have all the information that's in front of me. The only people that do are the people at the Treasury Department and the Treasurer himself. And you've got to assume that he's trying to do the right thing and trying to make it all happen. And it's such a complicated mechanism. It's so complicated. And the complexity of that kind of leads me to this point I want to kind of round out here and get your thoughts on it, Ed, is the complexity of the systems that we live under are partly the reason that it is such a dog's breakfast. If you could privatize a lot of these things, then you made these things for profit, then maybe under regulation, of course, so, people are not getting price gouged and there has to be some constraints in there. But if you start peeling away these things from government and giving government less responsibility for all of these things and putting that in the hands of businesses and public companies that are there for their shareholders to make money, then it creates a different kind of economy and a different kind of opportunity. Do you know who Michael Malice is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Michael Malice is the modern day anarchist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he advocates that, we should live in an anarchist type society because democracy doesn't work. The president of the United States, one person can't be responsible for 300 million people. It's like ridiculous, right? Even in Australia, one person can't be responsible for 25 million people. One person can't be responsible for more than about 10 people. That's the reality of management and the ability to manage. And he advocates for an anarchist type society, which he believes that we actually live in. So I'm not advocating for anarchy. What I'm advocating for is a society where you and I come together and we have an agreement. You're going to supply a service to me. You'll deliver that service, give me an invoice, and then I'll pay you.
Yeah, there's a word for that. It's called capitalism.
Exactly right. And part of the problem that we have with big government and all of this CPI manipulation, that's what I'm trying to highlight, right?
Yeah.
Is if you take away the responsibility of all of this complexity from government and you lay that at the feet of business, then the government can just concentrate on collecting taxes. And instead of trying to concentrate on some CPI bullshit, right? And then they can distribute the taxes where it belongs, in infrastructure, roads, rails, hospitals, schools, all of those things. But that all seems to be forgotten.
Yeah, look, there are no problems that cannot be fixed by the free market.
All problems can be fixed by the free market.
That's right.
That's the whole point, right?
That's right.
The whole...
because there's accountability there. If you don't produce a good product, your competitor is going to put a better product. Competition gives us better products. When there's competition, you have to give people what they want, what they need, right? Government, they have no accountability. That's why they can afford to throw $700 billion at a solar plant that's never going to produce, it's never going to be profitable. But what do they care? It's not their money.
You said it yesterday on the show. It's that Margaret Thatcher quote, right? Socialism works until you run out of other people's money.
That's right. It's fantastic.
And you said your bloody country broke.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about sending the state of California broke, shall we? I find these cultural arguments really interesting here as an Aussie, right? I see these things going on in America and I see the periphery of it. I don't really know the detail of it, but when I talk to you, I get the detail and I get how fired up you are about this. So the state of California, if you don't know, folks, are talking about paying reparations to people that were offended on Reddit because someone said something about, I don't know, something not being true, or it's just a very, very strange situation. But all jokes aside, they are literally paying reparations to people in California. And can you give us some more background on that, Ed?
Well, not yet. They're not. It's not official anything, and we're going to talk about that at the end. So let me start by painting the picture for anybody of you out in the world who aren't familiar with this subject matter, I'm going to play you a few clips. It only take a couple minutes, and then we'll open it up for discussion. And just a little spoiler alert, I hope you're sitting down for this. All right, here we go.
62-year-old Denise Green has lived in Southern California her entire life.
This is my grandmother right here.
She knows her ancestors came from Mississippi, but much of her family history was unknown. That is until her niece started doing research.
Here's the 1880 census.
Adrienne Aviodan is a professional genealogist in Tampa, Florida. But even she spent 2 decades and thousands of dollars before uncovering the name Philip Branch.
So Philip Branch is my 4th great grandfather, and he was an enslaved person.
What was your reaction when Adrienne told you that your family is direct descendants of an enslaved person named Philip Branch?
I thought that was awesome. It was just a little overwhelming.
The vital lineage information could be valuable in California as it debates what is owed to descendants of the enslaved. Camila Moore is chair of the California Reparations Task Force, the first in the nation's statewide effort to address systemic racism against African Americans caused by the enduring legacy of slavery. Could it be something as simple as you take a cheek swab, you submit your DNA, and they go, oh, you're a descendant of an enslaved person, here's your check?
I mean, it could be. Again, this is all still a work in progress.
Welcome back. The Reparations Task Force voted over the weekend on their final recommendation for the state. The task force was created 2 years ago to analyze and determine the best way to repay African Americans.
And our political reporter Morgan Reiner joins us now with the details.
Luke and Devin, the Reparations Task Force did make their final decision, but it doesn't have any legal weight. They're going to hand over the recommendations to the legislature July 1st, and then lawmakers will determine if and how they turn it into law. More than 100 people gathered in Oakland on Saturday to express frustrations over the impact slavery has had on African Americans.
We often talk about reparations, and people say that we're getting a handout, but we've given this country, let alone the whole world, a handout for the last 200 years. No, 500 years. U.S.
Barbara Lee, who was running for Senate, weighed in during public comments.
Reparations are not a luxury for our people, but a human right long overdue for millions of Americans.
In this 34-page document the Reparations Task Force approved, it outlines how much Black Californians who are descendants of slaves could be compensated. $13,600 each year for health harms, $148,000 for housing discrimination,
Okay, so I'm having technical difficulty. Did that cut out there, Rob, or was that running and I didn't know?
It was running it was a bit blurry. I think because of StreamYard and the live stream and all the stuff going on there.
Okay.
But look, we definitely got the point there that they were doing it, and it is maddening. It is absolutely mad. How do you feel about that? You must feel mad about that.
This is absolutely pure pandering, and it's evil. You know, the message that these politicians are given to Black people is that they are permanent victims. That this argument is so filled with flaws. I mean, look, we were a British colony there for a long time, and there's a lot of slavery going on there. So are we going to drag Britain into the reparations too? Can
I share my screen and highlight something to highlight that very point? Because I got something pretty interesting here as I was watching that, because I've heard this argument a fair bit, and I heard this the other day, that how many ancestors do you have? Like how many people are in your lineage, right? So this is just a quick Google search shows me this, right? So if this is you've got 2 grandparents, 4, 8, 16, and it goes all the way out like this, right? So 13 generations away from you. So say everybody lived 70 years. So 70 times 13, that would be the year. That's how many are in that generation. So 4,096. And the cumulative total of ancestors is 8,000 odd people that are part of your lineage going back 13 generations. So this is the thing that highlights the ridiculousness of it. Imagine if you were in a stadium of 8,000 people who happen to be all actually related to you. They would be from all races, from all countries on planet Earth, all types of people that you could imagine. So there'd be good people in there, bad people in there, stupid people in there, really smart people in there. There'd be all sorts of people that are in your family lineage, in your family tree. And imagine if all of those people who had died, because they're no longer with us, because they were your family, you're the result of them. Imagine if 8,000 people could see you standing on the stage in that stadium, looking at you at some town hall in Oakland saying, we've suffered. I've suffered. I need to be paid. They would all be looking at you going, you haven't suffered. You've prospered from everything that we went through. You're prospering. You're not entitled to anything. What makes you think that you're entitled? And then I think these people that I think for the last 600 or 700 years, or however long that would be in that many generations, imagine if they could see you today complaining about the things that you're complaining about, trying to get money out of the government for doing nothing, even though you live in the best time in human history. There's been no better time in human history. We've all got a tummy full of food, a pocket full of money, and a safe place to sleep. You know, food, water, and shelter are the last things that you could ever possibly have to worry about. Even if you were a homeless person, you don't even have to think about that.
Listen, every minority group in the country, in the world, they have access to grind. They've all suffered discrimination in one form or another. So where does it end? Are you guys more special than the next victim group? I mean, please tell me what the hierarchy is. Which group is the most put upon? No, this is evil. Look, so Newsom put together this organization to study this 2 years ago. He had to know this is not going to happen, but he did it to pander, to give people the idea. Oh boy, I might get $1 million out of this. Boy, it's sure. So he becomes popular, right? He knew this is never going to happen. He knew this never going to. So yesterday, Newsom put out a release. So he's saying, you know what? We don't have the money, but we're gonna give you reparations in other ways, through affirmative action programs and anti-racist policies. And it's kind of like, when you go to your boss for a raise, and your boss says, you come to me for a raise, Rob, and you think you deserve it. And I say, Rob, you know what? You're a really good employee. And I want you to know how much I appreciate you. I can't give you a raise, but I'm going to make you employee of the month. So you can feel better about it. So you walk up to, if you work for if you want to appreciate me, give me the money. That's how you can appreciate me. So Newsom, he's saying, I can't give you money, but I'll make you employee of the month. How's that? So this is what
I look at it.
He's a typical politician.
But yeah, so that's what I was going to say, right? Is if you could try and look at it from both sides of the argument, right? So it's very easy for you and me to sit here because we're hardworking individuals, and you and I want to take personal responsibility for ourselves and be responsible for our own actions. That's why we do what it is that we do. There's plenty of people here in Australia on social welfare, and there's the government. You're sucking off the tit of the government when you're taking social welfare, when you live in a lucky country with a great opportunity. All you've got to do is put in a bit of effort. And all Western countries in the world are the same. I don't buy into it that, I live in the Philippines, it's a shit opportunity. Bullshit. You can sit at home and work as a freelancer on your computer from the Philippines, just like anybody else can on planet Earth. And you're just making excuses because you're lazy. And imagine if those 8,000 ancestors could see you now complaining about the things that you're complaining about. Stop it. Stop whinging. You're not entitled to whinge. But let me close the loop here for you, and tell me what you think of this. I was going to say that for whatever reason, politicians are pandering to these people. And what it seems to me like is the politicians they're really wishy-washy. So if I try and look at it from the person who says, we deserve reparations, the reason that we have all of this is because my ancestors suffered and I'm entitled to something for their suffering. That's what they're saying, right? Even though to you and me in our rational brains, we go, that is just crazy. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, cool. Let me try and see it from your side, because maybe I'll learn something. I'm listening to what you're saying. I'm listening, I'm hearing it, but then I'm not really getting it. And then the politician. So now I kind of change positions and I put myself in the people that are in charge, the bureaucrats signing the checks. So maybe there's something in that. Maybe they're right. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to please everybody. But no matter what you do, no matter who you are on planet Earth, whether you're the president, the mayor of a city, or you're the governor of California, no matter what you do, you're never going to be able to change your behavior in enough ways to please everybody. At some point, you have to take a stand. At some point, you have to say, no, this is actually not going to work. No, this won't work out. I'm saying no to this policy, and I know that that's going to get my constituents offside, and there's a percentage of people that are going to hate me for this, but the vast majority of people will see sense and reason, and then off we go, and we just keep moving forward. That's why Ron DeSantis in Florida is so well liked, is because he takes a stand, and he looks at these things and goes, I'm not going to let Disney push me around. I'm not going to listen to these stupid woke people and let them push me around. I'm just going to say no. And the overwhelming silent majority go, yeah, I agree with that. And then there's some really loudmouth people on the other side screaming and shouting about why he's a moron and why that doesn't work and why that's all wrong and why he's a racist. So when I look at it, I think I try and hear both sides of the arguments, but then I see the politicians pandering to it. They're just actually people pleasing. That seems to be what they're doing, because in reality, no normal sane person would think that somebody suffering 8 generations ago entitles you to something. Like in the 8,000 people in my direct lineage from 13 generations, there's going to be people who were murdered in there. There's going to be people who died in childbirth in there. There's going to be children that died before they reached the age of 10. There's all sorts of horrendous, awful things that happen in the human experience, but that doesn't entitle me to anything. That's like, why do they think that they are entitled to it? Like, I don't get it. I'm trying to see both sides of the argument. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to listen. I'm trying to hear. I'm just not getting it. I don't understand.
Well, this is the socialist mentality. We were talking about it yesterday. These socialists have a really good marketing campaign.
Yeah, but in reality, it's just terrible.
Of course,
when you come to execute it. It doesn't work.
Of course, it leads to nothing but misery. But it's an easy sell to people. Free stuff. That's an easy sell. Oh, free stuff. And capitalism and freedom is not taught in the schools anymore.
Yeah.
Capitalism and freedom, they have to be taught with every new generation. And it's not being taught anymore. The people in charge of our educational system are all socialists. They've been indoctrinating our children for decades now. And now we have graduates of that indoctrination camp having their own kids and send them to the same so there's no counterweight when they go home, because the parents are cheering them on, and here we are. So that's why 8 out of 10 young people love the idea of socialism. They love socialism, but then when you ask them what it is, they can't tell you what it is. Right?
What about this idea? It kind of goes to the heart of what you're talking about as well. What happens if in some strange alternative universe, you start paying these people and they get hundreds of thousands of dollars and they get a handout every month of $13,000. And this actually comes to pass in some weird alternative universe. If that actually happens, I think, so tell me what you think about this. I think if you gave a poor person $1 million today, in 2 years' time, they'll be poor again. I think if you give a poor
that's
person...
true. Well, okay, so 2 things are going to happen, in my opinion. First of all, finish your thought.
Well, I was just going to say, if you give a poor person $10,000 a month today, by the end of the 3rd week, they'll be broke, and they'll be screaming and shouting that their monthly payments don't come fast enough. Because in order for you to understand how money works, it's not about a handout. When you understand how money works and how recurring income works and how having a job actually helps you, and if you have a job, how you invest, how it gets you out of a rat race to create recurring income and to build your wealth. Once you understand how money works, then it's playing the game is actually really super fun. And you want to go out there and be a capitalist. You want to go out there and do that. But if you're of the mindset that I need a handout, it doesn't matter how much money I hand out to you. That's the problem with social welfare, right? It doesn't matter how much money I give you. It will never be enough. And even if I gave you what would be considered to be enough in accordance with the society that you live in, you're still going to be broke because you're a fucking idiot, because you're broke in the first place.
Well, look, so if they were to get in some fantasy world, let's say they did hand out these checks, I would make it a requirement that they have to sign a document before they get the money that says, okay, when this money is gone, I will never ask for anything ever again for the rest of my life.
The 18th generation of my mother's side.
Yeah, right. That's my point. Is it's not going to end there. So two things are going to happen. Is they're always going to be coming back to the well. There's always going to be something else to be aggrieved about because they're a permanent victim. Remember that they've got permanent victim status.
But that victim status is coupled with the lack of education about how money works.
Of course it is. No, the victim status is they've been taught, a certain class of people have been taught that they can never get ahead because of their skin color. That's racist. That's the definition of racism. Telling little children, that they have a natural disadvantage because of their skin color, that's racist. The message should be, you can become anything you want in this country if you apply yourself. Now I didn't get to the last two clips but there were two final clips there showing people who hated this idea of reparations, and these are Black people saying, I'm not a victim. I'm perfectly fine. I was never a slave. My parents were never slaves. I can do whatever I want with my life. And they found this insulting, the idea of reparation. They found it insulting. So I think this is doing Black people a disservice, because if this were to pass, it is going to just exacerbate race tensions, because you're going to have a lot of people, a lot of white people, anybody who's not Black, feeling really resentful over this. So that's just going to make this racial divisions so much worse. So
let me show you how racial division's about to be exacerbated here in Australia to a level of what I would consider being almost apartheid level South African disaster. So here in Australia, we have this voice thing coming out, and there's a politician, pretty outspoken politician here in Australia called Pauline Hanson, and she's from a party called One Nation, and she's pretty conservative. Would she be conservative or liberal? I don't know. She's just like a normal person. Right, she just you could get her on this call right now and have a conversation with her, just like you and me, and she's probably a little bit more educated and a bit more fired up than what you and I are on the given topics that we discuss, because she's doing that all day, every day as a job as in Parliament as a senator, right? But she came out yesterday and said, "Do you know how much this voice referendum we're having here in Australia is?" Do you have referendums in the US?
Oh yeah,
you have that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the referendum here in Australia, the last one that we had in Australia was to say, should we become a republic or remain in the monarchy? It cost $94 million to put that out there and to do that, and ultimately it failed. Because people are like, why would we leave the monarchy? What's wrong? Everyone, it's fine, right? We didn't want to. There's no reason to. Anyway, they never put their case forward strong enough to become a republic and change the way the parliament works and the way the government works and everything. And it came out yesterday that the government is going to spend $334 million. So it's literally 4 times the amount, or 3 times the amount of what it was last time. And about, I think something like $60 million is put aside for mental health for Aboriginal Indigenous Australians because of the process. And it's like they're budgeting in and factoring in the fact that we're going to do this, but they don't actually know how to do any of it or to make it work, because they haven't come out with the detail of how it's actually going to work. So imagine, just listen to the oxymoron of what I'm saying. They're putting aside $330-something million, but to try and get a vote to say, yes, we're going to do this and change the Constitution of Australia, which can't be changed back once it's been done. And they haven't given us the detail of how the system's actually going to work. So you're spending $300 million to get people to tick a yes box on a piece of paper, but then you're not telling me what they're ticking the yes box on. Even though we already spend, get this, $4 billion a year on something that's already in place, trying to solve the problems you're trying to solve with this. It just, in a small country like Australia, it just doesn't make any sense at all. And it's so unbelievably divisive on so many levels. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, they think that they have a monopoly on virtue, these people.
I like that. That should be on a shirt. You leftists don't have a monopoly on virtue.
Yeah.
Your little Ukrainian pin that you have on your suit doesn't work either, right?
Yeah.
Even the American flag or the Australian flag doesn't virtue signal anything to me.
Well, our American flags come with a built-in camera on it that the CIA.
Yeah, that's it. The CIA ones.
Yeah. And a microphone.
Answer the questions for me, Ed. That's on the screen there. Reparations, should we pay or not?
No. And
That's
don't
a big fat no from you.
And don't let the door hit you on the way out.
Don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out, and don't come back asking such dumb questions again. That's funny. I think it's a big fat no from me as well, only because of the embarrassment factor. I would be too embarrassed to put my hand out and ask for something like that when the 8,000 people that came before me in my family lineage would look at me and go, "You are an absolute deadbeat loser. You are not entitled to a single thing, no matter what you say or what I suffered." And, I think of it, if I was suffering through something now, would I want my future generations to actually benefit from my suffering today? No, it doesn't. It just doesn't make any sense. It's not something that a normal person would ever consider in their life. So, yeah, I'm glad you raised that cultural question. I'm looking forward to tackling more of those types of topics in the future with you, Ed.
Okay, so I don't know how much you want to go. Look, I want to talk about Tucker Carlson real quick, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah.
So I had a video made, but I won't play it because Tucker is it's on this channel. If someone wants to watch Tucker's statement,
his announcement,
but we have it on the channel here, so you can watch it. Rob put it out yesterday. He put it out last night, so you can watch it. It's like a 2-minute statement, but for those of you who haven't heard, Tucker announced that he is coming back, and he's going to be coming back on Twitter. Now, 2 weeks ago, when he first announced that he was parting ways with Fox News, I did a segment here telling people I predicted that it would have the Obi-Wan Kenobi effect, that he would become more powerful than ever. And don't worry about it. He's coming back, and when he comes back, he will be more powerful than ever. And I do think that he is going to be more powerful than ever on this new platform. He's going to have even more freedoms. But the question I have for you, Robbie, is remember the gentleman who offered him $100 million to come on board? Who was it?
Patrick David, yeah.
Yeah, Patrick. And I told you, boy, what a great! I knew he wasn't going to take the offer, but it was a free way to boost his bona fides as a conservative. I'll give him $100 million. He knew Tucker wasn't going to take it, but he got free publicity and he boosted. I think we should throw out an offer to Tucker for $200 million.
We'll be the media company behind it. We'll make it up as we go. We'll build the airplane as we falling off the cliff. The saying goes like that. Something.
The only thing is we have to pay you as we go. Okay, so
you know what's really interesting, Ed, is that Tucker would pull like 1.5, 1.6 million people on a good night on his show. And I'm just looking at that tweet right now. It's got 22.9 million views. So it just shows you the reach that Twitter has versus the reach that Fox News has. And it shows you that if he was the most popular and the #1 journalist, conservative journalist in the world, and that's based on Fox's distribution via YouTube, Twitter, and all of their other associated platforms, it shows to me that just Twitter by itself is the single biggest media powerhouse on planet Earth. And no platform is going to get you more distribution faster than that platform. So that's a really interesting thing that's happening there. And when I saw that yesterday, I thought, we've got to get in there and do more in there as well. Because instead of just uploading videos here in YouTube or in Rumble, I'm going to start uploading the videos into Twitter. And so they're natively available there in Twitter as well. Something that I've kind of been a bit remiss with, because Twitter is not something that's very big here in Australia. People just kind of shrug their shoulders. And I think because the OG social media that we have is Facebook, and all old people like me are on Facebook, but I generally don't use that anymore. But young people are not on Facebook. They use Snapchat and they use TikTok and they Twitter, like what? But Twitter is kind of more mainstream news and communication than it is entertainment. And kids use Snapchat and TikTok to be entertained and to communicate. So if we want to reach a younger audience, that's where we got to go. But I'm not
Well,
letting CCP into my.
We're not going to use we're not going to use TikTok unless we want to reach the Chinese crowd. Yeah.
We could be really inflammatory on there. The more inflammatory you are on TikTok, the bigger your audience actually gets.
Really?
You know? Oh yeah, absolutely, man. That's I don't have TikTok because it's CCP spyware, right? I just don't want it on any of my devices, but I've seen it. And my mates got it, and one of my mates has got like 200,000 followers or something on TikTok. He just like kicks ass in there. But the more you speak out about government, the more you say about, you shine a light on hypocrisy and go, this is bullshit, and you're like kind of like being the angry, Grandpa Simpson shouting at the clouds. The more eyeballs you get, and the way their algorithm.
But not the Chinese government. Not criticizing.
No. Don't do that.
Yeah. So I want to ask you though. I mean, people can be deplatformed on Twitter too, right? And, do you think Elon's changed that culture significantly enough yet, or?
I think it's just a regular type deplatforming. You can't incite violence. You can't talk about guns, pornography, or all of when you agree to terms and conditions of a platform. That's what Twitter was silencing you because you're saying something against COVID or against medical procedures or against doctors or against the mainstream narrative. So you can no longer be cancelled for that. You can go there and say whatever the hell you want, but you still can't incite violence. You can't incite negative things. Just free speech has a limit. You can't be a jerk. And a jerk that is out to hurt somebody with their words, like meaning actually inciting physical violence. That's where they draw the line. So I know that some people have been chicaned because of that recently as well.
Well, that's the only line that should be drawn. Is inciting actual physical violence. Everything, but even the most despicable speech should be protected. That's the.
Well, if I go onto Twitter and tell you how to make, a pressure cooker bomb from regular stuff that you can buy down at your local Home Depot, they're going to cancel me, right? So
well, that's
you can't do that.
Yeah, well, that's in that one gray area that we mentioned before. That I'll give you. That is because there's no real reason to do that other than to promote violence, right?
Yeah, exactly right. So, and if you don't, in Tucker's message yesterday, it was really interesting because he's pretty much saying that if you don't have the ability to say what you think, you don't really have anything, and you don't live in a free society. Twitter literally is the only place that we could have the conversations that we have. Sometimes we're going a little bit close to the sun here on this show, man. We might get burnt. And some of the things that we say is, and you think, well, what are they talking about? They just got conservative, mainstream Christian kind of views and values. But no, like I know just from the YouTube algorithm, if you go a little bit too close, you're going to get your fingers burnt. You've got to be super careful with all of that.
I know that too. So we need everybody's help out there. Please hit that like button because it does help, gives us a little bit of protection against being canceled. So please.
It absolutely does. For our first YouTube live here, we still didn't quite break the hour. We're at hour 17 here. We're still going, but that's kind of okay. That's par for the course. Ladies and gentlemen, we're also over on Spotify, Twitter, of course, Telegram, and on Rumble. And I encourage you to have a look at the show notes today. If you can't see it right away, that's because I haven't been able to populate it because we're live right now. But if you have a look at the show notes, you will see all of the links where you can reach us over there. Ed, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here on the show again, mate. It's always good fun to do this with you, and I'm looking forward to doing it at the same time again tomorrow, mate. It's bye for now. See you, mate.
See you, buddy.